Welcome, everyone, to the Ready for the Draft podcast. I am your host, Gregg Schutze. This is episode 10 of the 2024 podcast series, where we take a look at the draft-eligible prospects and get you ready for the NFL draft. And I know it's been a minute since I recorded a podcast, and truth be told, we took a trip to Peru, a week-long trip. It was just absolutely phenomenal. If that isn't on your bucket list, it should be. Machu Picchu, really a spiritual experience. Rainbow Mountain, highly recommend. This was something that was covered up by glaciers, and we only recently got to be able to see all the different colors, all the different minerals, and 16,000 feet up in the air. We ended up taking some ATVs up there, which was amazing. And then obviously Peru is known for its cuisine. The food, especially in Lima, absolutely phenomenal. Although we went to Cusco, got to spend a lot of time there. Food was great. Even got to hit up the dunes in Huacachina. And so you got the coastal life there in Lima, and then the dunes and the dune buggies and the desert in Ica, and then you travel to Cusco, and obviously you've got the Andes Mountains there. We didn't even get to touch the rainforest and go into the Amazon yet, so I'm looking forward to going back and experiencing Peru again. But when you take an excursion like that, you take a trip, it's a lot harder to get back into the flow of being able to catch up on not only on the games and your notes, but then also being able to get the podcast recorded. So what I really wanted to do was spend a lot of time studying the players, getting through a lot of the game film as I could, and really having a better understanding of these players before I did record my next podcast, because I didn't want to be a little bit behind. And I feel like now is the right time to jump right back into things, because look, there's a lot of football left to be played during the 2023 college football season before we even hit any of the pre-draft process. So let's go ahead and jump right into things. And when you look at, if we talk position by position, you look at the quarterback position, and obviously, Caleb Williams and the story there, Heisman Trophy winner, reigning Heisman Trophy winner. And, I think for the first part of the season, it was looking like, hey, this is a good chance to be the first Heisman Trophy winner, dual Heisman Trophy winner since Archie Griffin. But, some of those games, the 6 touchdowns there against Colorado, and then Arizona putting the team on his back, not having the best day throwing the football, but willing that team to victory, third overtime, coming around and into the boundary and being able to extend that football on the inside of the pylon. Just absolutely phenomenal work. Then against Notre Dame, he throws those 3 interceptions. That's really was the beginning of the end of his Heisman campaign, because he ends up losing the Trojans, that is, 4 of their next 5 games. That was really the catalyst there with that Notre Dame team, and really they're playing the upper echelon, and really the back half of that schedule for the Trojans was going to be merciless. But when you look at Notre Dame, this was a team that really put a lot of pressure on Caleb Williams. I think the offensive line finally got exposed against the Irish, and obviously we know what's happened with that defense. When you talk about 50-plus plays from scrimmage, this is a defense that ranks 133rd out of 133 FBS programs at this point. So we knew that Alex Grinch was going to go. But you watch that Notre Dame game, and yes, he was pressing a little bit, but he was under pressure on the first interception that he threw, and he tried to hit Lake McCree up the seam, threw it a little bit high because of the pressure. Xavier Watts ends up picking it off. This was a throw that he was able to hit later on in the game. The second interception was a tip ball. I think with this, he was rolling out to his left, and actually, I want to say he was rolling out to his left. He may have just slid in the pocket, but he had Dorian Singer coming free, and had that ball not been tipped, he hits Dorian Singer for a big play. Third play, though, is really the one that got him into trouble. Rolling out to the left, a lot of times, we'd see him with that amazing torque that he has, that arm talent, and being able to roll out to the left and then still be able to slingshot it back, across his body, make that throw. And unfortunately, he didn't see Xavier Watts. I'm sorry, I want to say it was Benjamin Morrison that was underneath the play, because it was Xavier Watts who picked off the tip pass. Benjamin Morrison, the corner, coming underneath and picking off the pass. Against Utah, those over 70% completion percentage, a guy that was doing it with both his legs and his arm. And the duel there against Washington, 312 yards and 3 touchdowns. He and Michael Penix Jr. just going back and forth. And even against Oregon, over 290 yards passing, just the 1 touchdown, had a touchdown on the ground. But this is a guy, look, he's had to essentially put this team on his back. So when you watch him and you see how exhausted he is, that is legitimate. He is legitimately tired because he's spending so much time running for his life. This is a guy who, you watch the early pressure. He has got pressure, guys in his face so early on a lot of his throws that he has to end up escaping the pocket and making these dynamic plays, avoiding guys, then being able to get the head back around. You saw that against Washington. He avoids the rush, kind of spins around, resets his feet, and fires a strike to Brendan Rice, at the pylon. One of the things for me with Caleb Williams, we know from the improvisation, he's the first thing that we've seen that can resemble Patrick Mahomes out on a college football field. But look, can he, we know that he can play off platform, but can he play within the pocket? Can he play within the confines of an offense? And that's really the big question mark. I think that was the question mark that we had with Patrick Mahomes when he was coming out of Texas Tech. But Caleb, one of the things that I've seen, especially in the last couple of games, is his ability to stand tall within the pocket. You see some of the manipulation. He's not necessarily pulling it and taking off and running like you saw before. This is a guy who was able to slide either left or right to buy a little bit of time. You saw some pinpoint accuracy with some of his throws down the sideline. And that's really an area that I think he still needs to work on, because those throws, getting it to the wide side, down the side, really just outside the numbers in general, down the sideline, still struggles with some of that. You still see him with the inability to, not just speed up the process a little bit at times, because there are times where you need him to get rid of the football, and instead of taking what the defense gives him, there are times where he's looking to make the bigger play. He's looking down the field as opposed to taking the underneath throw. And then obviously the ball security. That's going to be the biggest thing, and the one thing that teams are going to be pointing at is over 30 fumbles. Because he had 2 against Oregon. I think that's 32 now since 2021. That's the most in the FBS. He's lost 8 now after Evan Williams recovered the fumble there against Oregon. And so that's going to be a huge concern. You've got a guy who's able to do a lot of magnificent things with his feet and the improv, and then the ability to throw, he looks like a shortstop a lot of times. His ability to drop the arm angle and some of the quick throws, but then the ability to throw on the run as well, whether it's to the left or to the right. Just really phenomenal athleticism. But can he take care of the football? That's one of the things that Patrick Mahomes has always been adept at doing, is taking care of the football. And while Caleb Williams doesn't throw a ton of interceptions, he has 5 on the year, and 3 were in one game. It's really taking care of those fumbles. That's really going to be the biggest thing going forward for Caleb Williams. I think Drake Maye right now, for me, is the more polished passer from within the pocket. This is a guy who makes quick decisions. He's big. He's physical. A guy that he's still trying to figure out, when do I run, when do I throw. You'll also see some really weird decision making at times. Throwing into coverage, trusting his arm a little bit too much at times, but you watch his ability to throw his receivers open. I think that's something that is tremendous. His eye discipline, his ability to manipulate that safety, remarkable. And so when you talk about the top 2 quarterbacks, Caleb Williams and Drake Maye, really it's going to come down to pick your poison. Which quarterback are you looking for? That's why I have them as 1A and 1B in my rankings. The question is who's going to be the quarterback after that? I think there are a lot of quarterbacks: Bo Nix, J.J. McCarthy, Michael Penix Jr., Jaden Daniels has emerged now. And then that second tier, you've got Jordan Travis and Michael Pratt, Spencer Rattler, Cameron Ward, Joe Milton. Some of these guys are juniors. In the case of Pratt, Ward, these guys could come back. McCarthy as well, could come back for another season. But when I look at this, Bo Nix, I think he may be the Heisman favorite now. I think the Pac-12 is keeping that Heisman in its last 2 seasons of existence. The Pac-12 will have the last 2 Heisman, so I think that's pretty cool. But when you look at Bo Nix, for where he came, there at that, as an Auburn freshman, and I know Patrick Nix, his dad, had all that success there with the Tigers, all the pressure on him. I did not understand the hype. I did not understand it because I didn't see enough on the film that said, yeah, this is going to be a difference maker there at Oregon. But what he's been able to do, look, 57 starts under his belt. I mean, that's an FBS record. This is a guy that is in complete command of his offense. He understands where to go with the football. He's able to throw off script when he needs to, taking what the defense gives him. There are a lot of those throws that are underneath throws, a lot of throws right around the line of scrimmage. I understand that. That's why that completion percentage is a little bit inflated. But you watch the throws that he needs to make down the football field. He throws with velocity. He can air the football out. Look, I know against USC, some of the big plays, had receivers running wide open. But one of the plays that I really loved was that pocket presence, his ability to spin away from Solomon Byrd in the pocket, get that head snapped right around, and finds Tez Johnson. Kalen Bullock nowhere to be found. Kalen Bullock to me, and sidebar, Kalen Bullock in terms of the safeties, he's the guy that I think has hurt his draft stock the most this season. This was a guy that came in as a top 3 guy, a guy that people were talking about as a potential first rounder. 6'3", 190. He's not very physical, doesn't wrap up, and now he's not only, he used to be a center fielder, a guy that would come over the top and make plays. We've seen that a couple of times this year. There was a pick 6 in one of the games, but what you don't get out of Kalen Bullock is that consistency. And in this game, with Tez Johnson, I don't know if there was just a lack of communication on the back end, but he's moving to the inside. There's an in-breaking route and on a post, and ultimately Johnson was running a corner, and he got completely turned around. I think he was supposed to go with Johnson, and he was expecting, I think, the second guy in to end up taking Johnson, and he was going to end up taking the post, and just seems to be out of position. And so I think if there's a safety that's hurt his draft stock, it's Kalen Bullock more than anybody else. But getting back to Bo Nix, just like I said, the decision-making has been on point the entire season. And look, the one thing I think the teams are going to worry about is that age now. I mean, 57 starts. I mean, that's a lot of starts, a lot of wear on that body as well. But when you look at his completion percentage, you're talking about 77.7%. At Auburn, man, 59.4% completion percentage, 39 touchdowns with 16 interceptions. He's cut down on the INTs. This year, 29 touchdowns, just 2 interceptions. He just continues to get better and better each and every season. And his ability, the first drive of the second half, he was taking advantage of what the defense was giving and playing in off coverage. Didn't really need to force it. 6 yards, 7 yards, 1 yard, 16 yards, another 7-yarder, 5, just continuing to move the football down the field. And look, if USC was going to play in off coverage, he's going to go ahead and take advantage of that. And you saw him repeatedly making those throws. The understanding, he and Troy Franklin, the connection is absolutely there. You see a lot of the work that's being put in as well. So to me, Bo Nix is that number 3 quarterback right now. J.J. McCarthy is a guy that I think is right there. But look, J.J. McCarthy against Penn State, I think he threw, 8 passes the entire game. This is a guy, he's running an offense that is run heavy. We know this. We've got, an offensive line. You've got Blake Corum. You've got Donovan Edwards. So we know that this is a run-first offense. But what you get with J.J. McCarthy, he plays in that pro-style offense. He's a guy that has a big-time arm, throws a lot of big-time throws. He and Roman Wilson have that connection there on the outside. You see the ability to make those throws, flipping the hips as he's on the move, delivering a football down the field. You just see he's so poised in the pocket, the balance, staying under control, and like I said, the accuracy is there. This is a kid who I think still needs to develop. I think he's still a little green, in terms of some of the, look, the talent though is definitely off the charts. This is a guy that was able to take the ball away from Cade McNamara and take over things there. I think the growth is continually, you're seeing that, the mobility, the arm strength. Here's the thing, is this guy, he's playing behind an offensive line that's, look, it's another Joe Moore finalist, I would say. And Bo Nix, he's got an offensive line that's led by Jackson Powers Johnson, who I think is the number 3 center in the draft, behind Cedric Van Pran and Zach Frazier. You watch him dominate guys. He climbs out to the second level, locks on, and then drives this guy. The athleticism along with the power and strength. To me, he's number 3, and I think he's going to continue to close the gap there, especially through the pre-draft process. I believe he's a junior though, so he could be coming back to Eugene, and why not? Especially with the way Dan Lanning has things firing there with the Ducks, and then Michael Penix Jr., another quarterback that we're going to talk about. All 3 of these guys that are sitting there below Williams and Maye, they have the benefit of playing behind these phenomenal offensive lines. Michael Penix Jr., you've got Troy Fashanu, the left tackle, a guy who I think is going to be the number 1 guard. He's played his way into potentially being a first-round pick. We'll talk about him here in just a sec, but Roger Rosengarten has proven to be an offensive lineman who's an NFL caliber O lineman there on the right side as well. His offensive line, he's able to sit back and process things and make throws down the football field, hitting guys. You want to talk about arm strength. There's nobody who has a better arm in this year's draft other than maybe Joe Milton than Michael Penix Jr. Being able to throw the football 40, 50 yards from the left hash to the wide side of the field down the sideline and put the ball where only his receiver can make the catch. You see the back shoulder throws. You see his ability. At the game against Utah, Odunze gets an inside release up the seam and puts the ball right on that inside shoulder away from the corner who had that outside leverage. Just perfect pass and just right on the money. The thing with his arm strength is he's another guy that wants to utilize that to his advantage and make some ill-advised throws at times. The other thing with Penix obviously is the 2 knee injuries. He has 2 ACLs that ended his season. Also, had a couple of AC joint injuries as well. You watch him, I think the last couple of games, we've seen him get out and move a little bit more. You see him rolling out. You see some of the sprint outs and such. But he's not a guy who's going to be able to create with his legs like the other guys that we've mentioned, which is why I've got Penix Jr. there, sitting there at number 5. But if you put any of these guys behind the offensive lines that both Caleb Williams and Drake Maye have had to play behind, I think we're talking about different things. I think we're talking about guys that are really struggling under duress, because we've seen that when Michael Penix Jr. does get a guy in his face, those throws are not very accurate, and he's not able to create on his own. Bo Nix, on the other hand, J.J. McCarthy, they are able to escape, and they are able to make those plays off-platform, and they are able to, they've improved their accuracy in making those off-platform throws. But what Caleb Williams is doing and what Drake Maye is doing behind porous offensive lines, I think that's what sets them apart. I mentioned the second group. You've got Jordan Travis, who I think is making a push for that Heisman. I thought the game against Miami, he was just okay. 263 yards through the air. But the guy that I think is rising up those boards and should be there in New York, I think LSU, the fact that they've lost the game, as many games, it's because of their defense. It's not because of Jaden Daniels one bit. Jaden Daniels, to me, is the guy who I think, in terms of the quarterback, he and Bo Nix have made the biggest leaps as quarterbacks from their freshman year until now. At Arizona, he was a 62% passer, but now at right around 70%, 71.4 this season for LSU. Look, 30 touchdowns, just 4 interceptions, and then what he's able to do with his legs as well. Over 900 yards on the ground. He's probably going to have double-digit touchdowns on the ground again. The deep ball accuracy is phenomenal. To me, Jaden Daniels is the guy that's moved his way into that day 2 consideration. I think Jordan Travis, has that day 2 feel, possibly also, day 3. But there are a lot of teams that need quarterbacks, so I think there are going to be guys that are going to be drafted higher than they probably should. But those are the guys that I'm taking a look at there. At the running back position, Audric Estime has really climbed up draft boards. You see the physicality, his ability to run between the tackles, but then he's hurdling guys. Out at the second level. I want to say that was against Clemson. He hurled Andrew Makuba, and when you got a guy who's 227 pounds hurdling guys, that really starts to turn some heads. And with Estime, he and Jonathan Brooks, I think, were kind of the 2 guys that everyone looked at and said, yeah, these are probably your top 2 running backs. 988 yards this season, 13 touchdowns on the year. But Estime has also shown his ability to catch the football out of the backfield. He's doubled the reception total this year. Only a junior, so he could come back to South Bend. I mentioned Jonathan Brooks. This is a guy that was, he was the leading rusher, 6 foot, 200 pounds. Ran with physicality, had the burst, over 1,100 yards on the ground, and 10 touchdowns, also 25 receptions with 11.4 yards per reception. But he tears that ACL, I think, with the rehab and everything else. This is a guy, as a running back, you're probably going to need to come back for one more year. We saw that with Blake Corum. And with Blake Corum, there's nobody better within 5 yards than Blake Corum in this year's draft. Obviously, when you've got an offensive line that he has blocking for him, it makes his job a lot easier. But last year, 7th in the Heisman voting, despite the ACL injury, over 1,400 yards, 18 touchdowns. He probably would have entered the draft last year, and been that number 2, number 3 running back, probably behind both Bijan Robinson and Jahmyr Gibbs. This year, 794 yards, 18 touchdowns, a guy who also has 50 receptions catching the football out of the backfield. But the thing with the knee injury was you saw the vertical speed. You saw his ability to get outside. You saw the burst. The burst was still there, but the biggest thing was, are we going to see that lateral agility? Because that's what really set him apart with those jump cuts and being able to press the line of scrimmage, the vision to see the hole, and then put that foot in the ground and get there in a hurry. We are seeing that out of Blake Corum. We didn't see it at the start of the season, but that's something that we're continuing to see as the season progresses. Travion Henderson is back to his ways again. He's battled some injuries as well. So, when these guys, Raheem Sanders, Rocket Sanders is finally back from injury. Some of these top running backs have allowed guys like Bucky Irving and Trey Benson to really rise up draft boards. I've got them at number 4 and number 5 respectively. Bucky Irving, he's only 5'10", 190 pounds, but the junior, the contact balance, the physicality with which he plays, this is a guy that can play out on the outside and between the tackles, tremendous vision, the contact balance is tremendous. He's going to be back-to-back 1,000-yard rushers there for the Ducks. Already has 10 touchdowns on the season, and then the receptions. 71 receptions in the last 2 seasons, including 40 so far this year. He's dynamic in space, and a guy, once you get the football to him, you see the acceleration. But, if we talk about acceleration, then we have to mention Trey Benson as well. 6'1", 211. I thought, there was a play that only went for ultimately only got credited for 7 yards, but a 46-yarder against Miami. He catches, this pitch into the boundary. And you watch him set up the guy. I'm blanking on the name. I think it was a linebacker that was getting to the outside, and he was able to kind of hesitate and then set up, get to the outside, and then down the sideline. And you watch this explosive burst. He planted and cut back to the inside just a little bit, and that was where he ended up getting called out of bounds. But you watch him split the defense and just break these angles. Both he and Bucky Irving have that speed to be able to do that. Watching Braylon Allen, he's starting to catch the football out of the backfield a little bit more. I think that's something that everyone wanted to see. Donovan Edwards looks like a receiver running his routes. I think that's one of the things that's going to definitely help him. Even though when we talk about Donovan Edwards, he hasn't touched the football a ton there at Michigan, because obviously when you have Blake Corum running the football, he's going to get the lion's share of the carries. Just 84 carries for 284 yards with 24 receptions. He has 62 receptions in his career, 11.1 yards per reception. So obviously that's going to go a long way. By contrast, if you talk about Braylon Allen this year in Luke Fickell's offense, or really it's Phil Longo's offense, 25 catches but just 4.2 yards per reception. A lot of throws right around the line of scrimmage for Braylon Allen, the guy that, he got banged up, at points during the season as well. So, Braylon Allen, though, he's a one-cut-and-go type of a runner. I think that's really the big thing that you see out of him more than anything else right now. When you talk about Ray Davis is a physical runner there for Kentucky, and a guy that I think has just continued to develop as a running back. 929 yards, 11 touchdowns, 5.8 yards per carry. A guy that also has, can catch the football out of the backfield as well. So, he's a guy that I think has continued to impress and is moving up some draft boards. I know a lot of people love Marshawn Lloyd, and myself included. I think the burst, the feet, he's got some of the quickest feet out of this entire running back group. but man, the ball security. This is a guy that just seems to either drop balls, fumbles at the most inopportune times. And I think that's one of the things that USC has to kind of temper things a little bit, because look, when he has the football, 7.4 yards per yards per carry, but the fumbles, that's going to come back to bite you. So ball security, a huge issue there for Marshawn Lloyd. When you get to the receivers, this is going to be a special receiver group. I think there could be as many as 13, 14 guys taken in the first 2 rounds. Marvin Harrison Jr., obviously, is he the best player in this year's draft? I mean, you can make the argument. I wouldn't necessarily agree with that, but you can make that argument. 6'3", 202. There are just things that this guy can do that no other receiver can. When you look at his size, his ability still to be able to drive off the football, to be able to sink those hips, run those crisp routes, be able to be physical when he needs to, that catch radius, huge hands. Marvin Harrison, he runs those drag routes, right? And then he makes the catch, and then he runs away from the defense. People say that he doesn't really make plays after the catch. Look, you don't have to sit there and juke a guy left and right, juke him out of his shorts just to be able to make plays after the catch. I think Marvin Harrison Jr., he's going to be wide receiver 1. He'll be a top 3 pick. If there's a team in the top 3 that passes on Marvin Harrison Jr. when they could have taken him, I think they may be regretting that decision. You look at Keon, Coleman, Malik Nabers, Odunze. Those are the 3 guys that I think are battling it out for that number 2 receiver spot. Keon, Coleman, highlight reel catches. He's 6'4", 215, only a junior. And look, he came from Michigan State to Florida State. He's a basketball player. The physicality you see out on the football field, every time that he makes a play out there, you see the athleticism, the physicality with which he plays. But Malik Nabers is going to be a guy that's going to really push for that number 2 spot. I think that wide receiver 2 is still, like I said, open, and I think a lot of the testing is going to answer a lot of the questions, because you really want to see just how fast is Keon Coleman, how fast is MJH, but Malik Nabers, 6'1", 188, a guy that I think he can play on the outside, he can play on the slot, the versatility. There aren't a ton of receivers that are able to do that. Over 1,200 yards this season, 17.8 yards per catch, 10 touchdowns, just a dynamic player on the outside. And then Odunze is just a vertical threat. 6'3", 200 pounds, uses that big body to his advantage, shielding the ball from the defenders. He's more than just a vertical threat, but that's really where he's showcased his ability. Back shoulder throws, again, being able to use that big frame. Back-to-back 1,100-yard seasons, 18.6 yards per reception, 9 touchdowns. The vertical presence is real with Odunze. Then you've got Meka Ibuka, who he's a tremendous athlete in his own right. 6'1", 203, battled some injuries this year again. But look, the ability to get in and out of his breaks. He's more of a possession guy, but definitely one of those receivers that should be considered a first rounder. Then you get into the Texas guys. You got Adonai Mitchell, 6'4", 196 pounds. All he does is catch touchdowns, and then you've got the explosiveness of Xavier Worthy. A guy that's just really a lot of fun to watch. It's weird because Adonai Mitchell, you look at his stats, 637 yards and 9 touchdowns. K-State, he had the big game, 149 yards through the air and a touchdown. But not going to have eye-popping numbers, but you watch his ability to make plays down the field. You watch his ability to adjust to the football in the air and then utilize that size to his advantage. Then you've got a guy like Xavier Worthy. Over just under 2,500 yards in his career so far with Texas and 25 touchdowns. But the suddenness with the route running, his ability, this guy is going to be a monster in the slot. Actually returned a punt for a touchdown as well. In his 15 punt returns, 18.7 yards per return. And sudden, I think, is one of those words that comes to mind when you think about Xavier Worthy. Troy Franklin, though, he and Xavier Legette and Tez Walker are 3 big receivers who can run. You watch Troy Franklin against USC, against Washington, a guy that can get vertical in a hurry and run by you. 6'2", 170. He's got sprinter speed. And speaking of sprinter speed, Xavier Legette has that speed as well. He's 6'3", 227, and I think they had him topped out at 23 miles an hour or something like that. I mean, it's something ridiculous for a guy his size. He reminds me a lot of the hype around DK Metcalf. I think, when you watch him, I'll be curious to see what the 3-cone drill, what that is going to look like, that stop and start, that change of direction. That's really what hurt DK's draft stock and really started pulling him into the second round. And then with Tez Walker, this is a guy, he could come back for another year. He was the guy that was ruled ineligible by the NCAA, a guy that was at Kent State, comes to North Carolina. Once he's been out on the field at 6'3", 200 pounds, this is a guy that just continues to get vertical on guys. He uses the big body to his advantage, but he's so long. You look at from Miami, 6 catches for 132 yards, 11 catches for 146 yards against Virginia. 4 touchdowns in those 2 games. Then against Duke in a 2 overtime thriller, 7 catches, 162 yards. And when you look at that in just 6 games, 600 yards receiving, 17.1 yards per reception, and 6 touchdowns, catching passes from Drake Maye. He's instantly become that number 1 receiver and really made North Carolina's offense really a more high-powered offense. When you look at that tight end position, obviously losing Brock Bowers really kind of hurt the overall stock there of the tight end position. But now that Brock Bowers is back, that's not going to hurt his draft stock any. But it really started wanting to look at the overall landscape of the position. And Brock Bowers, to me, top 10 pick. If I'm a team that's not looking for a quarterback, look, if the Rams aren't looking for an eventual replacement for Matthew Stafford, I'd take him in a heartbeat. Get Brock Bowers in there with Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua. Are you kidding me? I mean, all you need, is a healthy Matthew Stafford, and you're having fun with that offense. Jatavian Sanders battled some injuries, but look, he's still a guy that can be a weapon down the field. Mitchell Evans of Notre Dame, Luke Lachey of Iowa, a couple of juniors, both bit with the injury bug. Same with Thomas Yasmin out of Utah. Those guys are all out for the year, all torn knees. So that's kind of helped Cade Stover with his draft stock. This is a guy that's shown that he can get down the seam, and he's improved as a blocker as well. I think Theo Johnson, Tyler Warren, guys that are physical in the running game there with Nicholas Singleton and Katron Allen, but guys that have proven that they can catch the football down the field. And then A.J. Barner there at Michigan, a guy that he's there with Colston Loveland, who's more of the receiver. Barner's known as the blocker, but a guy that I think is, because of that blocking ability, I think that's something that's really valued. And people really lose sight of that. You saw Ko Kieft was drafted in the 6th round, and this was a guy that never caught passes for the Gophers at all. When we talk about tackles, I think Olu Fashanu, Joe Alt is one of the more fascinating duels there. Olu Fashanu, the athleticism is unreal. I mean, this is a guy, he gets out of his stance so quickly. He's waiting for guys to get to the outside. You see his ability to drop anchor. The ability to move laterally is phenomenal. Look, the footwork, there's no real issue there. The big thing is just being strong, being able to continue to drive. And that's something that I think when you watch them against Michigan, keeping those hands inside, he was standing up Braden McGregor, finishing his block, driving him to the ground. You saw his ability to extend those long arms in the run game and drive guys. Turn him to the outside, steer him where he wants him to. I saw him take on Kenneth Grant, got his hands inside, kept his feet moving, kept Grant in front, drove him off the football. A guy that. Look, Michael Hall Jr., got a really quick burst off the ball, able to open up, block down on the defensive tackle, open up big running lane for the running back, awareness to pick up defensive tackles coming around on stunts. You see him, the ability to recover. You saw that with JT Tuimoloau, Tui Moloau. Spin move to the inside, was able to then recover and get him back in front. I think Joe Alt is another guy, though, that is phenomenal. You watch his, the balance, the knee bend. He's consistent with the hand placement. He's a technician, good athleticism. Against Clemson, pulled around to the right on consecutive plays. Gains of 26 by Estime. Athleticism, sealing his man to the inside on the first play, and then seal the edge so that Estime can then get to the outside on the other. The bend. That's one of the things that I see, just consistently looking at my notes. The ability to anchor. You watch him taking on bull rushes, and he takes a couple of steps back, digs in, and then is able to just sit there and anchor and stand his man up. Hand placement. Going up against Ashton Gelati, who's a really good edge rusher there for Louisville, being able to handle him as well. You see the choppy steps, being able to mirror guys. One of the things, he did get bowled over by Mason Regier. Got to Sam Hartman for the sack near the end of the first half there against Louisville. So pad level at times, can be an issue for him. So I've got him at number 2. I've got Fashanu at number 1, but I think the battle is going to really be for number 3, 4, 5, and 6. Jordan Morgan, Taliese Fuaga, J.C. Latham, Amarius Mims. Now, in the case of Fuaga, 6'6", 334 pounds, he's the right tackle there for Oregon State. And Jordan Morgan is Arizona's left tackle, and it's kind of pick your poison when you're talking about these two guys. What I love with Fuaga is the physicality. You see the power. He just kind of throws guys around at times, but guys that size should not be able to move as well as he does. He's able to get out and pull and get out, to the second level in a hurry. You see the lateral agility there in the ability to, on his kick slides. He's so quick out of his stance. One of the things that he needs to watch is that inside move. He'll get caught leaning a little bit. You saw that against Colorado. Arden Walker, Jordan Dominic were able to take advantage of that. But what I loved was he didn't let that happen again as he was going up against those guys. That he started to be able to make that power step and get back to the inside to wall them off. To me, Taliese Fuaga, if you're looking for a right tackle, Fuaga is going to be your guy. And if you're looking for a left tackle, then it's going to be Jordan Morgan, no doubt about it. You watch him against UCLA, and whether it was Gabriel Murphy, Laiatu Latu, Carl Jones Jr., Grayson Murphy, he handled them all. Handled every single one of them. You watch the hands, the ability to strike, the punch is pretty violent, and he's able to avoid a lot of those chops. That's one of the things that Latu is so good at, is he'll chop and then he'll have that rip and then he's by you, and he did not allow that to happen. That's one of the things that I thought was impressive. You also saw his ability to the recovery ability, nearly losing his balance, regains the footing, kept the man in front of him. Typewriter feet, excellent change of direction, mirrors guys, locks out those arms, and just stays. The balance, like I said, is exceptional. You watch him, though, when he gets a hold of Laiatu Latu, was able to take him kind of at the top of the pad level at times, kind of drive him away and drive him down to the ground. I love the physicality. I love the movement skills. 6'6", 320. I know that he had the ACL injury, but I think he's back to form. J.C. Latham, 6'6", 335 out of Alabama. The thing for me when I watch J.C. Latham is he's so strong. He's so physical. Once he latches on, it's over. That's one of the things that you saw. You watched him against Harold Perkins in that LSU game. Was able to line him up, keep him in front, and once Perkins worked to the outside the block, he was able to recover, get his hands back on him, force him up the field. When he sits down and keeps that pad level down, he's able to move well laterally and keep that defensive end in front. That pad level will creep up on him at times. He took on Mason Smith, stood him up in pass protection easily. So strong at the point of attack, hands on his man, just kind of leans into him and just generates a lot of movement. The thing that I worry about him is complacency at times. It seems like he'll get a little disinterested. It also just seems like the movement isn't always there because he wants to overpower guys, and the ability to change directions, you don't always see that. So that's something that worries me at times when I watch J.C. Latham play. When I watch him and Fuaga moves a little bit better than J.C. Latham, so that's why I've got the nod over him, but they're both really phenomenal right tackles. Then you look at Amarius Mims. He's 6'7", 330. This is kind of the wild card. This is the guy that I think will be the boomer bust guy. You see the athleticism that's apparent. He's been battling injuries. He's going to be coming back. But when he's healthy, the guy moves exceptionally well. Is he going to play at left tackle or right tackle? That's going to be a question. Can he make the transition? I think he's athletic enough to be able to do that. Graham Barton at Duke, after that 6'5", 311. 5-position versatility, that goes a long way. We know that. You look at Peter Skoronski. You look at Rashawn Slater before that. And the thing with Graham Barton, he's battled some injuries. So is he going to be a first rounder? Maybe a late 1, early 2, but a guy that I think is is primed, wherever he's going to play. He's a guy that I think is going to get the job done. Tyler Guyton, 6'6", 306, Oklahoma's right tackle. I think this is a guy that's still raw. He's still developing, but you see the athleticism there. And then Javon Foster, for me, he and Patrick Paul out of Houston. Javon Foster, he's 6'5", 319. I think he's had a phenomenal season. When I watch Foster play, he's held up well against a lot of edge rushers. I watched him against Georgia, whether it was Marvin Jones Jr. or Michael Williams. It didn't matter who he had going up against him. He was able to keep him, use his length, use that size to his advantage. He's not the most fleet of foot. He's not the most athletic. But, man, it just seemed like it didn't matter who it was. He was picking up Smell Munden and drove him up the field. Michael Williams stood him up, slowing that rush off the edge. Getting the pad level under Marvin Jones and then just being able to drive him away. You watched him. There was a 3rd down rep against Mason Smith. First tried to win to the inside move and an arm over. Use those hands to kind of shove him away and create that distance and then be able to go back to work and beat him. But so I think the athleticism at times can get him a little bit in trouble. But he's a guy that I need to watch more film of, because it's one of those things to where he looks so lumbering, especially when he's pulling, that you're like, this guy isn't the most athletic, but man, he dominates a lot of guys there at the point of attack. So I need to definitely watch more film there. Patrick Paul is a guy that's going to maul you, out physical you. So another guy that I think is a lot of fun to watch. Troy Fautanu out of Washington, the guard. Let's talk about him for a second, because Troy Fautanu, I think, was on everybody's radar as a guard. Look, what he's been able to do, he's only 6'4", 312, but his athleticism there, his ability to, with his kick slide, showing that lateral agility, he's a guy that I think could play tackle if he needs to. But it's one of those, there was against USC, excellent job with recovery. Solomon Byrd wins with the spin move to the inside to beat him, showed the athleticism to spin back around himself and then wash Byrd down the line. You watch the physicality. This is a guy that loves to get his hands on you and drive you off the football. There's one thing that you saw against Connor O'Toole there of Utah. Kept beating him to the inside with these arm overs, and he wasn't able to recover. He was leaning to the outside and trying to kind of get that head start. And that he was really susceptible to those inside moves, especially there with Connor O'Toole. But he's so light on his feet, good knee bend. I think he's a guy that could he play tackle? Sure, but I think he put him in, let him play guard right away. I think he's a guy that can end up being a first rounder. Cooper Beebe, 6'4", 322, has that tackle guard potential. I think he could be a Pro Bowl guard. Physical, nasty, much like Zach Zinter. I think those are your 3 top guards. Zach Zinter, 6'6", 315. He's looking to maul you, drive you into the ground. Very physical as a pass protector for sure. Also likes to get dirty in the run game. And then when you look at the defense, it's kind of up in the air, in a lot of these positions. Who's the number 1 defensive end? Like true, pure defensive end, a guy that's going to put his hand in the dirt. I still have Jared Verse as my number 1 guy, 6'4", 251. I know if you look at the stats there for the Florida State Seminole, he transferred in from Albany, but this is a guy that has put in the work, and I think he continues to get better, really. 17 tackles for loss and 9 sacks last year. This year, just 6.5 tackles for loss, 4.5 sacks. But look, teams are really focusing in on him, and you're seeing other guys like Joshua Farmer and Patrick Payton and a lot of these other guys making plays because Jared Verse is drawing so much attention. When he came over from Albany, or to Albany, I thought it was really a great story because I want to say he was a tight end. and starts there as that tight end, and then after that, I think it was 212 pounds. And that was before COVID. Once it hit, he worked out every day, bulked up to 240 pounds, became an edge rusher, and the rest is history. So he's still relatively new to the position. You see the speed rush. You see the ability to, he doesn't bend nearly as well as some of these guys, but man, I was watching the Miami game. He faked an inside rush, got the left tackle leaning, and then used those hands to chop down and clear to the outside, bends around, getting to the quarterback. Against Wake Forest, drove his hands into the body of the left tackle, bull rush up the field while bending into the pocket, got off the block to kind of get it on the sack with Patrick Payton. Slap, arm over, beating the tackles. This is also a guy that can set the edge against the run. To me, he's a guy that I think is still the number one edge rusher, but defensive end. But JT Tui Moloau, look, 6'4", 270. I watch him, and against Maryland, the speed rush, getting to the quarterback as that wide 9. You watch the bull rush as well, his ability to get under pad levels. He attacked Olu Fashanu. Attacked the outside, both hands to the outside shoulder, speed to power to kind of drive through him to the quarterback, hit Drew Aller's arm as he was trying to throw. You just watch the bull rush over and over. There was another play, it was a 4th and 30 play against Penn State. Left hand to the right shoulder pad of Fashanu. Bull rush drove him back all the way to Aller for the sack. So that's one of the things, again, with Fashanu, he still needs to improve the strength with his game that I think all probably has an edge on. But I think Fashanu has the athleticism for sure. But back to Moloau. I mean, Penn State is where he just comes in and just dominates. But you watch him in a lot of other games. I watched him against Indiana. Speed off the edge, getting to the quarterback so quickly. I think a lot of people are going to get caught up with the stats. You look at JT and just 5.5 tackles for loss, 4 sacks. But it's all about the pressures. The sacks, I think you have to take that with a grain of salt at times. I think you have to look at the pressures, and this is the guy that's continuing to rack up the pressures. Moloau, actually, according to Pro Football Focus, among all edge rushers, he's 14th in the country with 27 hurries. This is a guy also 14.8% win rate. So Moloau is a guy that I think you have to keep an eye on. Another guy that I really like is Braylon Trice. When you talk about sacks, you look at the 4 sacks, you're like, 4 sacks, that's not going to get it done. But then you look at the effectiveness that he has. He's affecting the game in a lot of different ways. 12 hits, that's hits on the quarterback. That's tied for 2nd in the country. And then you look at the total number of hurries. He leads the country with 38 quarterback hurries to go along with those 4 sacks that I just mentioned. With Braylon Trice, he's physical. He's not going to bend like some of these other guys. When you talk about explosiveness, he's not going to be that guy. He's a guy that is going to be right around the quarterback. He's just, he doesn't make the splash plays, but you watch his presence is felt early and often. I think that's something that you really like when you watch Braylon Trice play. Is number 8. You're going to be in it for the long haul, having to deal with him. He's a guy that can set the edge as well. You're going to see the bull rush driving guys back into the backfield, but he can bend. He can dip, he can bend. I think that's something that people forget that he can do, but he can absolutely do that. He can absolutely get that done. He can bend a little bit. So I've got Trice definitely in my top 5 when we're talking about just defensive ends. Another guy I'm a big fan of is Brandon Dorless. This is a guy who has scheme versatility. He could be a 5 technique in a 34 defense. He kicks inside kind of on some of those NASCAR packages, 3rd downs to be an interior edge rusher. He can also just be a 4-3 defensive end. He's 6'3", 290 pounds. 27 tackles for loss, 12 sacks in his career, 6.5 going for loss and 5 sacks this year, 6 pass breakups as well. This is a guy that's winning at a much better rate. Just winning those one-on-one matchups, and a guy that can affect the game. He's making plays even when he's not the guy that's making the tackle. He's the guy that's blowing up plays there for the Ducks. That defense is going to go as he does. So continue to watch him making plays there in the backfield. How about Landon Jackson out of Arkansas? 6'7", 281. I think consistency is really the biggest thing for him. But Landon Jackson, I think, really made a name for himself. in that Alabama game. I think that's really where he made some of that money. You watch him, the jump off the edge, the swipe, the rip on the left tackle, Caden Proctor, bends, dips under, turns the corner, gets to the quarterback. That was only his 4th of the season. But then later on, going against Caden Proctor again, taking advantage, I think, of the youth there at that left tackle spot. But speed rush again, chops down on the outside arm, rip with a swipe, clears, bends, gets to the quarterback again. You love the size, you love the physicality, you love his bend, you love the athleticism. You just want to see him be more consistent. I think Darius Robinson is showing, at 6'5", 296. He's got some scheme versatility to him. He's a guy that is continually beating guys on the interior. Mohamed Kamara, look, 6'1", 250 there out of Colorado State. He's a guy that is continuously getting to the quarterback. I think he's a guy that we have to be talking about. 12 sacks, 25 hurries, 8 quarterback hits. A guy that just continues to win. Look, 19% win rate as well. You have to be talking about him. Probably, is he a day 2 guy? Probably not, but definitely early day 3. Justin Aboigbe at 6'5", 296. Look, there's always going to be a defensive end every year that you're going to be looking at coming out of Alabama. Aboigbe is the next guy. I think you had Byron Murphy last year. It'll be him this year. Ashton Gelati, I mentioned him earlier. When you look at the dimensions, he's 6'2", 270, I want to say. But a guy that just continues to get to the quarterback. 8 sacks on the year, 37 hurries, second only to the aforementioned Braylon Trice in that area. So he's another guy that I think we have to be talking about too. Defensive tackles, it's Jerzon, Johnny Newton, and then everybody else. 6'2", 285. He's this year's Kalijah Cansey. I think there's no doubt about that. When you look at the numbers, it's ridiculous. 6 sacks, 28 hurries, 4 hits, from the defensive tackle position. He's so quick coming off the football, and yes, he is undersized. But I think he's a guy that teams that are looking for, could he be a 5 technique? I think he could. He could be a 3 technique. He could be a Geno Atkins type, and a guy that's going to blow up plays from the interior. Had 14 tackles for loss, 5.5 sacks in 2022. He's got 6.5, 5.5 this year, 5 pass breakups in his career as well. He's the clear-cut number 1 defensive tackle. If anybody tells you anything else, they're crazy. Leonard Taylor Jr., I think he's probably number 2 at this point in my book. 6'3", 305 there out of Miami. He's battled some injuries a little bit, but man, he's really quick off the ball, wants to get into the backfield in a hurry. T'Vondre Sweat. If you're looking for a nose tackle, a dude that's just going to, he's 6'4", 340. He's huge, occupies the point of attack, but he's so athletic. Making plays behind the line of scrimmage. 7.5 tackles for loss this year. And you watch him move. Guys his size should not move as well as he does. It's ridiculous. Tyleik Williams out of Ohio State, I think, has had a good year. Chris Jenkins playing like his dad, who was a Carolina Panther. I look at Chris Jenkins. I think he's a guy that's going to continue to improve his draft stock. Dante Corleone, 6'2", 320, has shown the ability to get after the quarterback a little bit. He's mostly known as a run stuffer there at 6'2", 305. But, back-to-back seasons, 5.5 tackles for loss, 3 sacks. So if nothing else, you can say that he's consistent. If you want a sleeper, my sleeper is Patrick Jenkins out of Tulane. This is a guy, another undersized defensive tackle, but a guy that can make plays along the interior of that line. 9 tackles for loss, 4.5 sacks. A guy that is relentless getting after the quarterback. A lot of fun to watch along the interior of that line there for the Green Wave. I think Howard Cross has also shown the ability to hold the point of attack, to be physical, use his hands, the power, the bull rush, and then some of that short area agility. I think those are things that kind of jump off when you watch the film with him. Outside linebackers, the edge rushers, I think Dallas Turner and Chop Robinson, that's going to be the battle for the number 1 spot. I may end up leaning Chop Robinson just because of the explosiveness. You watched Michigan purposely move from their passing game to the run because of Chop Robinson, because of his ability to get off the ball so fast and get into the backfield. They couldn't block him. Carson Barnhart could not block him. There was no need to even move 44 over and try his hand at Ladarius Henderson because Carson Barnhart couldn't even put his hands on him, let alone block him. Dallas Turner, you love the physicality, a guy that can bend, can come off the edge, be an explosive edge rusher, a guy that can affect the running game as well. But I've got Dallas Turner as my number one, but I'm kind of leaning more towards chop. But then you look at Laiatu Latu, 6'4", 265, and this is really the battle, right? I think when you're talking about things at the edge rush position, because Latu, 12 sacks, which is tied for 4th in the country. You look at the number of hits, he's right up there. Jared Verse has 10, Latu sitting there at 9, right behind him. Braylon Trice again with those 12, and then he's 6th in the country in hurries with 31. So not only is he getting to the quarterback at a high rate in terms of finishing and making that splash play, if you will, with the sacks, but he's also affecting the play, really making the quarterback uncomfortable. The hurries, the hits, those are things that teams are going to look at. And to me, he's the most consistent of the edge rushers because he's consistently applying pressure. The chop and the rip are just phenomenal. You watch him on his bend, he does this rip and then he kind of holds on to that arm to kind of help slingshot him around and really make sure that arm doesn't try to reposition and kind of keeps him locked in there as he's bending around the edge and gets to the quarterback in a hurry. Latu, it's difficult to really say. I think the medicals are going to be huge. UCLA's doctor came out and ultimately said, look, this guy can play and he'll be all right. Washington's doctor basically said he was going to have to retire due to the head and neck injuries that he sustained there. But look, Latu, to me, he's a guy that's, he'll be a first round pick. Depending on the medicals, he can end up being a top 15 guy. Jonah Ellis is the guy that I think has really risen up draft boards, 6'2", 246, the junior out of Utah. Could decide to come back for another year. This is a guy that, look, he bends, comes off the edge, 13 sacks on the year, 26 hurries as well. A guy that, I think, the win rate at 18.8. Again, these are a lot of guys that are winning at such a high clip. Look, none of the guys that we've mentioned so far have hit the 20.9 that we've seen out of Laiatu Latu. We just haven't seen that with a lot of these guys. So again, Latu is a guy, again, if the medicals check out, he's going to be right there. Dallas Turner, just so you know, 8 sacks, 8 hits, 24 hits, and then 18.3 on that win rate. So, right in that same ballpark with a lot of these guys. With Jonah Ellis, he's got the spin move. That's a patented move, but he's got a lot of other counters as well. Look, I was waiting for him to make an appearance there against Washington, but between Troy Fatanu and Roger Rosengarten, he disappeared. They handled him. They took care of him and cleared him out. And that was really disappointing to see because I think Utah really needed him coming off the edge. Barrett Carter, look, he's kind of an off-ball linebacker, but he's outside linebacker, so I kind of have him in this group. 6'1", 220 pounds, a guy that just flies around and makes plays, man. That's something that is evident when you watch him play. He and Jeremiah Trotter work well together. Princely Uma Milan, they're out of Florida, 6'5", 245 pounds. Solid pass rusher. I think he's still improving in that area. And when you look at the hurries, he has 26 under his belt, same number that Jonah Ellis has, and 1 shy of JT Tui Moloau, and just 2 shy of Johnny Newton. But I think his game is really against the run. You see his ability to set the edge at times. You see his ability to chase down the ball carrier. I think he's an underrated edge rusher and a guy that I think is going to continue to move up draft boards. Peyton Wilson. This dude seems to be everywhere there for NC State. 6'4", 238. This is a guy that has battled injuries. I think that's really the biggest thing that you talk about with number 11 there for the Wolfpack. But 376 tackles in his career, 42.5 going for loss, 13 sacks, 6 interceptions, 13 pass breakups. Guy does it all. He's all over the field. He's so intelligent, plays smart. But the injuries, that's something. Are they going to catch up to him? That's something that you have to be mindful of. Kevon Rucker out of North Carolina is a guy that I think we have to talk about. He had all those sacks early on, 8 sacks, 37 hurries, so he's still getting to the quarterback and pressuring. He's got a 20% win rate as well. A guy that just seems to continue to live in the backfield. He's a guy that's definitely improved his draft stock coming off the edge for the Tar Heels. Inside backers, Jeremiah Trotter doing Jeremiah Trotter things. He took over that game there against Notre Dame, including that pick 6. He's a guy we're going to continue to see his draft stock continue to rise. Edgerrin Cooper has been about as consistent a linebacker as you'll find. This is a guy that I don't think anybody really had in their on their radar at the top of their draft boards, and if they did, I'd be surprised. Had 3 sacks against Alabama, has 7 in his this season, 7.5 in his career. So he's really having a career season. 16 tackles for loss, just really putting everything together. You watch the instincts, his ability to drive on the football in a hurry. Same thing with Jalen Ford out of Texas. He's not the best, not the best athlete of this group, by a long shot. But one of the things that I love about 41 for Texas, 6'2", 221, is his ability to locate the football. 6 interceptions in the last 2 seasons with the Longhorns. He had 119 last season, 74 this year so far. 10 tackles for loss in each of the last 2 seasons. Just a nose for the football. I think he's one of the more underrated inside linebackers. Smail Mondon, he's covering running backs out of the backfield, guys. That just shouldn't happen for a guy 6'3", 225. Very athletic. Junior Colson out of Michigan is another guy that's extremely athletic. I think teams are going to look at Danny Stutzman, 6'4", 238. Nose for the football, scrapes over the top. He gets lost at times, and that's one of the things that you still worry about there, in Brett Venables' scheme. But a guy that I think is continuing to get better and better each and every year. I hope he comes back for one more season. I think he kind of needs that because I think he's kind of a step behind some of these guys. Tommy Eichenberg, just a nose for the football. Cedric Gray continues to make plays for North Carolina. Jamon Dumas-Johnson, he was a Butkus Award Butkus Award finalist a season ago. Breaks his forearm this year. So it's kind of that same thing, the Nolan Smith with the pec tear. Does he come out? That'll be an interesting dynamic to see how that plays out. When you look at the cornerbacks, I think Cooper, or Kool-Aid McKinstry, Cooper DeJean are your top 2 corners. I think there's really no question about that. With Kool-Aid, he's just so smooth. You love the hips, the fluid hips, his ability to turn and run. The ball skills are evident. 22 pass breakups in his career. Also a guy that has some return ability. With Cooper DeJean, you're also getting that return ability as well. We saw that punt. I think he's learned never to make any hand gestures that would even insinuate a fair catch. But still, look, 13.1 yards per punt return in his career over the last 2 seasons. Has taken one to the house this year. This guy just has a nose for the end zone. 5 interceptions last year, 3 that were taken to the house. 13 pass breakups, 7 total interceptions in his career. These guys obviously are the 2 lockdowns. Nate Wiggins, he's 6'2", 185 pounds. Out of Clemson. He's the guy that I think is going to continue to move up some draft boards. He's battling some injuries right now, so that's one of the things I think Clemson, just been battling a lot of injuries across the board. But I love his fluidity, his ability to make plays on the football. Kalen King there out of Penn State. I don't know what to do with Kalen King because he's a tremendous athlete. He's only 5'11", 187 pounds. He's so physical, but the game tape against Marvin Harrison Jr., he struggled in that matchup. And look, he's going to have to be much more consistent if he wants to be a first rounder. I think he still ends up being a first rounder, but I think there are a lot of guys that are nipping at his heels. One of those is Quinyon Mitchell out of Toledo. 6 foot, 197 pounds. I don't know why people aren't talking about this guy. Has yet to give up a touchdown this season. 10 pass breakups, has an interception under his belt as well. Has just given up 202 yards total in his during the season. And when you look at Quinyon Mitchell, his ability to drive so quickly on the football, the ball skills absolutely are evident. Had 5 interceptions a season ago. Look, 41 pass breakups in his career with the Toledo Rockets. I look at him. I think he could be a first rounder. I think there are a lot of people that would beg to differ, but I think this is a guy that has exceptional ball skills. You love the athleticism, and if he times well, I think he's a guy that can end up vaulting into round number 1. Kalen Carson the same way. Look, 6 foot, 190 pounds. This is a guy that can lock guys down. Hasn't had an interception in the last 2 years, but really, he teams kind of shy away from him. I think teams have learned early on that you don't want to throw around Kalen Carson. You watched him against Keon Coleman. He wraps up in a hurry, drives on him, and stays right there. There was one play, there was a box fade right on his hip as Coleman tried to elevate, gave him no separation, on him like glue, able to get a hand in and make a play. Wasn't afraid to be physical with Keon Coleman. I think that's one of the things that you saw. He did take a poor angle on a quick hitch, and Coleman was able to take it in for the touchdown. Real tight coverage against Coleman on a 14-yard touchdown, was fighting with them over the top. Receiver just attacked his leverage, ball thrown to the outside. He never got his head around. So, obviously there's a little bit of work to do there in terms of some of the technique. He's only a junior, so he can come back for another season. But I thought, he definitely held his own, definitely physical, definitely wasn't afraid of the challenge going up against a big receiver like Keon Coleman. I think Chris Abrams-Drain has definitely been a guy that's impressed me as well. I thought that against Tennessee, he got beaten badly by Dante Thornton on a 46-yard touchdown pass, thrown to the end zone. But you watched him against Ra Thomas. I thought he locked him down, driving quickly on the football, able to make plays on the ball. Driving in, he just seemed to continue to attack attack those hands, make plays on the football. And when he did make a catch, there was no yak. He was wrapping him up. I think Abrams-Drain's one of those guys when you talk about, the slot corners. He's going to be one of those first guys that people are going to be talking about. But I think Kamari Lassiter, Denzel Burke, TJ Tampa are all guys that we can be talking about on the outside. Are they going to be first rounders? I think there are a lot of guys that can be in that consideration. So I think a lot of it's going to be how well do they test, what do they look like in a lot of those workouts, and really I need to study a lot more film on a lot of the DBs, to be perfectly honest with you. It's just hard watching a lot of the live footage. You really have to watch a lot of the all 22 footage to really get a good gauge on the corners and being able to read the routes and the leverage and their fluidity. It's kind of hard to watch if you're just watching the broadcast. At the safety position, I think Cam Kitchens just looks like a first rounder to me. When you watch him play, 5'11", 202 pounds. When you look at the stats with Kitchens, 4 interceptions this year, 6 a season ago, so that's 10 if you're doing the math. 15 pass breakups as well. A guy that just flies around. He makes plays. He's physical in the box. He makes plays, like I said, he's got a nose for the football. We know that. But the ability to read and diagnose plays in a hurry. He can be a physical hitter coming downhill against the run. We saw that against North Carolina. You'll watch him read plays. I think there was a play where, Casey Concepcion there for NC State on a seam route. MJ Morris was trying to bend the receiver to the inside. Kitchens closed on the football, nearly made a pick as that center fielder. A guy that is going to come down. He's going to be physical with you. He's a guy that is going to just has a nose for the football. And as a free safety, that's the guy that you want. The physicality. I talked about Kalen Bullock at the beginning of the podcast and about how he gets, he's getting lost in coverage. But even if he was that great center fielder, he struggles. He takes poor angles. He's not much of a tackler. Not really all that effective in the run game. He's a guy that's going to come down and attack your legs, but he's not going to wrap up. And so guys are able to make easily bounce off of him, break his tackles, and pick up extra yards. Cam Kitchens is not that guy. Tyler Newman, 6'2", 205. To me, he's that number 2 safety and a guy that I think could end up being a first rounder. I think he has that ability. Look, when you talk about interceptions, he's got 12 in his career, 4 in each of the last 2 seasons, had 3 in 2021. 11 pass breakups as well. Also has 203 tackles. to his name, but this is a dude who just seems to fly around and make plays for the Gophers. He gets over the top. That's something that you definitely see, over the top and make plays, but he also comes down and is physical and aggressive in the run game. You want him in the box. He's the guy that's going to get to the perimeter and take guys out in a hurry. So he's, to me, Tyler Newman is one of those guys who's just a lot of fun to watch, patrolling the back end of the defense because of the size and the physicality. Cole Bishop out of Utah, this guy's a playmaker. He's a guy that's going to come up. He's going to hit you in the mouth. He's physical at the point of attack. When he got the targeting and was out for the first half, I'm trying to remember which game it was, but it definitely, you saw that with Utah, that they missed his presence on the back end. I think when you watch a guy, when you lose that guy on the back end, you want to see how how a team responds. And I thought that that was telling when you watched Cole Bishop's absence really felt. I think Xavier Watts out of Notre Dame is a guy that's moving up some draft boards for sure. This guy's a converted receiver, has 7 interceptions in his career. He just puts himself in a place to make plays. He's got tremendous hands. That's one thing that Beanie Bishop of West Virginia does not have. He's known as kind of the interception dropper. Because you look at the pass breakups, Beanie Bishop with 13 has 4 interceptions, but of those 13 pass breakups, a lot of those could have been picks. So Beanie Bishop, he's a corner out of West Virginia. He's a guy that I think has some ability. He's a guy that I think is going to get himself drafted. But man, just hold on to the football. That's the biggest thing. I think he's up to 19 pass breakups now. Now that I think about it, but when you talk about Xavier Watts, getting back to him, you love the hands. You love look. He's got the receiver hands as a converted receiver. He runs plays like a receiver as well, understands the route concepts, and puts himself in a position, like I said, to make plays. And so I think that is going to benefit him at the next level for sure. I think Bo Brady out of Maryland, 6'1", 200, very physical. Jalen Simpson is that veteran presence there for Auburn. Same thing with Latham Ransom. And I'll give you one last name, Jaden Hicks out of Washington State. He's 6'3", 209. He's a redshirt sophomore. Keep an eye on him. I love his play. I think he'll probably come back to Wazoo for one more year. But man, he is a lot of fun to watch. I'll give you a couple of sleepers, guys that maybe we didn't talk about here at the different positions. Michael Pratt at quarterback, 6'3", 220 pounds. You love the athleticism. You love the arm strength. He's a guy that, to me, as I watch Michael Pratt play, he's got an NFL arm. He looks like he could be a starting NFL quarterback. I think he's got one more year potentially there at Tulane. So I think there's a chance that we could see him come back for one more season. But if he does enter the draft, he'll be a guy that's floating there in that day 3 conversation, but a guy that I think teams may want to jump on and definitely latch on to him. I said sleepers, but I'm also going to give you a running back that needs to really focus on ball control, even more so than Marshawn Lloyd, and that's Carson Steele. Whether you want to call him Thor or Quadzilla, whatever it is they're calling him these days, Carson Steele, he's big, he's physical, he's got a good burst, doesn't shy away from contact. Man, this guy needs to hold on to the football. 2 fumbles, I think he lost them both in a recent game, and it was all because he didn't take care of the football. He didn't secure it, looked for contact, and ultimately loses the football because of it. How does that happen, right? When you look at the receiver position, Drake Stoops out of OU. This is a guy that he may not even get drafted. But when I look at Drake Stoops, he's 5'10", 185 pounds. And, he really didn't come on the scene for OU, until the last 2 seasons. This was a walk-on who ultimately earned a spot. And, last season, 393 yards, and then 692 so far this season. I think, what you really have to talk about is that game against West Virginia. Really the last 2 games. Against West Virginia, 10 catches, 164 yards, and 3 touchdowns. Game before that, Bedlam against OSU, 12 catches for 134 yards and a score. This is a guy, look, he has a nose for the football. Just impeccable route running, so reliable, tremendous hands. The catch radius for this kid, he's only 5'10", but man, he knows how to get open, knows how to make plays, and like I said, he's got a nose for that ball, knows where it's going to be, and makes plays on it. There are some throws that Dillon Gabriel put behind him, and he was able to adjust to the football and make a play. I compare him a lot to Hunter Renfrow. Renfrow, I think, was really hyped up because of the games that Clemson played in when he was there, and his ability to make the plays in the championship game. But look, when you look at his stats, 2,100 yards in his career, never had more than 602 receiving yards, 15 total touchdowns in his career there at Clemson, and right around the same size. Was a 5th-round pick of the Raiders, and Hunter Renfrow carved out a nice career there with the Raiders. So keep an eye on Drake Stoops. I think he's a guy that we could potentially see himself, sneak his way into a draft position when it's all said and done. I think when we talk about the offensive line, a guy I'm keeping my eye on is Christian Haynes out of Connecticut, 6'3", 305. Really not a guy that's under the radar by any means, but a guy that's definitely athletic. I think he moves really well. Was a guy that I thought he did a great job against NC State. Going up against a guy like Peyton Wilson, climbing to that second level, getting his hands under him, driving him away from the pocket, ultimately it was a run play by Victor Rosa, 15-yard touchdown. Sealing off linebackers on the backside, getting those hips around to wall off and make a play as well. A guy that was able to block down and clear out a huge hole for his running back as well. So you love the movement, you love the physicality. So he's a guy that I think is going to continue to move up draft boards. And keep an eye out for Joshua Gray of Oregon State. I think Oregon State's going to have their O-line will be a finalist for the Joe Moore Award. Joshua Gray has a big reason for that. 6'4", 288. He doesn't have enough length to be a tackle, but man, he's going to be a really nice guard at the next level. So he'll be a guy to keep an eye out for sure. When you talk about edge rushers, there's a guy playing at James Madison. I don't even know if anybody really is following this guy at all, but his name is Jalen Green. And Jalen Green, if you look at him, he's not the most imposing guy by any means. He's just 6'1" and 245 pounds. And if you look at his stat line, prior to this season, you're going to say, well, what has he really done? In 2022 as a junior, just 6 tackles for loss, 2.5 sacks. And a big reason for that was he was playing behind Isaac Ukwu, who wound up transferring to Ole Miss. And now, all of a sudden, this dude is finding ways to get into the backfield at an alarming rate. 21 tackles for loss, 15.5 sacks to lead the country. And when you talk about it, you're like, all right, well, is he getting to the quarterback outside of the sacks? What about his win rate? 31 hurries. So when you look at that 31, that's good for as a tie for 6th. He's tied with Laiatu Latu in that area. All of these stats are coming from Pro Football Focus. Thank you very much to Pro Football Focus for those numbers. And then with Jalen Green as well, he's winning at about 17.5 rate. So he's a guy that knows how to get after the quarterback. And when you watch him play, he has that speed to run coming off the arc. If a tackle or a guard gets their hands into his body, that's where he struggles. But the hands, the slap, the rip, the bend, getting under the pad level, he's so good. The ankle flexion, that bend keeps him low, keeps him turning that corner in such a hurry. You love the ability to push-pull to win coming off the edge as well, flattens out in such a hurry. And then you love the spin move to get inside rush, to get to the quarterback as well. I'm a huge fan of Jalen Green. He's a guy that I think teams need to continue to watch and keep an eye out for, because he's a guy that I think is going to end up moving up draft boards as we continue to go along. And there's one veteran that people really haven't been talking about that I'm really surprised. But a guy that, if we want to talk about Edgerrin Cooper and the ability to get after the quarterback, we got to talk about Nathaniel Watson as well. 6'2", 245, and a guy that just continues to find ways to get to the quarterback. 9 sacks, 11 tackles for loss, 95 total tackles. He's got 335 tackles in his career now, 33 going for loss, 20 sacks. Now, I know the Bulldogs, look, they're 4-6 this year. It's not going the way that they would have liked. Zach Arnett, his first full season as the head coach. But can we get some love for Nathaniel Watson? This is a guy that just continues to impress, and a guy that I think we're going to be talking about there in that mid-day 3 range, but a guy that I think has the ability to make an NFL roster. And one other guy, I don't see him coming out and entering the draft, but because he's a junior and he is draft eligible, I just wanted to mention Jason Henderson out of Old Dominion, 6'1", 220 pounds. Come on, 418 tackles, 32 going for loss, 6 sacks. This guy has a nose for the football. 18 tackles for loss, 4 sacks. This year, he's a football player, man. This is a guy that is so physical at the point of attack. So you love that out of him, but the instincts. He's got a nonstop motor. You see the speed laterally. He's able to run guys down from behind. You love his ability to spy and come downhill. Only 3 missed tackles this year. I think that's another thing. When you look at all the tackles that he has, only 3 total missed tackles, which is absolutely ridiculous. You love his ability. He doesn't stay blocked. Keeps his eyes on the football, and uses those hands to stack and shed and get off that block and chase him down. I think the big thing that people will point to is really the question of whether or not he can drop into coverage on a consistent basis. I think he's shown an ability to get after the quarterback at a much better rate this year. So if he does decide to come back to Old Dominion for one more season, that might be something that he wants to be able to showcase for everyone, is his ability to drop into coverage, understand the route concepts, show that fluidity in coverage. I think he's a tremendous athlete. I think he's a guy that, when we talk about guys, we talk about football players, right? And this is a guy that I think is a tremendous player. May not be the most gifted athletically by any means, but I just happened to watch the Monday Night Football game. The Raiders taking on the Jets, and they've been talking about Robert Spillane, right? 6'2", 220 pounds, coming out of Western Michigan, but 312 tackles, 32.5 going for loss, 10 sacks, 4 interceptions. A guy that just did a little bit of everything. You look at this guy, obviously, if he continues to get after the quarterback, shows his ability to drop into coverage a little bit, then he'll be a guy that I think people will start to talk about in that same category as a guy like Robert Spillane. What I love about Robert Spillane is just the instincts. I love that when he was a Bronco, and his ability to make plays wherever it was needed. It was one of those things to where he was pretty consistent in getting after the quarterback. In terms of the tackles, double-digit tackles for loss each of his last 2 seasons, and 199 tackles in his last 2 years there with the Broncos as well. Had 4 interceptions during those 2 seasons. So it's one of those things when you look at a guy like Jason Henderson, a guy who's already shown the instincts, his ability to play sideline to sideline. I kind of want to see him come back for one more year. I think there's a chance that he can break the record for the total number, the number of total tackles. He's just so much fun to watch. That nose for the football. He'll take you to the football. We had 186 tackles last year. He's already got 154, and let's see what he can do. What he can rack up. When it's all said and done there, with the Monarchs. So one last name that I wanted to throw out there for you, and he's a guy that could very well end up coming back for one more year. So let's go ahead and wrap things up. This is my first podcast in a little while, so I apologize for the length, but I did want to kind of catch things up, kind of give you guys an idea of where my head has been, what I've been thinking when I'm looking at the draft, and really where my rankings are at this point. And look, if I had to guess on a top 10, I think at the quarterback spot, you got Caleb Williams, you got Drake Maye. I don't see any other top 10 guys there. When you look at the receiver position, I think Marvin Harrison is going to be your, obviously a top 10 guy. Could Keon, Coleman, could Malik Nabers, Odunze. I think one, maybe two of those guys can end up being top 10 guys. Brock Bowers, there's a no-brainer. He will be a top 10 pick. Fashanu, Joe Alt, they'll both be top 10 guys as well. Let's see. After that, you get into the edge rushers. I think Jared Verse is probably going to be a mid-first rounder now. He and JT, Tui Moluau, Braylon Trice, Brandon Dorless, those guys could potentially be first rounders. I think your Jerzon Newton, Johnny, I think he'll probably be right there in round 17, but he won't be a top 10 guy. I think Chop Robinson will be a top 10 guy. I think Dallas Turner will as well. I think Chop Robinson, the big thing is the production, getting after the quarterback. But the athleticism, that's one of the things that I think is going to be in his favor. I think if you just looked at straight production, then Laiatu Latu would jump to the front of the line there for that. I think when you look at the secondary, you got Kool-Aid McKinstry. He'll be a top 10 guy for sure. Cooper DeJean will be right on his heels. I think Cam Kinchens will be a first rounder. He won't be taken that high. I'm going to be pounding the table for Jeremiah Trotter to be a first-round pick. I think he could be a difference maker there at that inside linebacker spot as well. But if you're scoring at home, I think you got two quarterbacks. I think as many as 3 receivers potentially. So that's 5 already. Plus Brock Bowers at 6. Fashanu and Joe Alt takes you to 8, and we haven't even gotten to the defense. We know that Kool-Aid McKinstry is a top corner. He could be a first round or a top 10 guy. So that puts us at 9. You got Dallas Turner, Chop Robinson, 10, 11. And then maybe Latu if the medicals check out. I don't think Jared Verse will be there. So that's right around, at least right now, that's kind of the gut, not even seeing who, which teams are going to be in there. There are going to be so many teams that are looking for a quarterback. It wouldn't surprise me if Bo Nix and J.J. McCarthy end up coming off the board in the top 10, or Michael Penix Jr. Any combination of those guys could come off the board in the top 10. But this past season, we thought we were going to see 4 quarterbacks taken in the top 10 potentially, definitely in the first round. We only saw 3. Bryce Young, C.J. Stroud, Anthony Richardson, Will Levis fell to round 2. What are we going to see this year? I think obviously we've got a much stronger quarterback class, so there's a good chance that we could see as many as 5 come off the board in round 1. But how many will come off the board in the top 10? Again, we'll have to see just how, which teams are sitting there at the top of the board, and how many teams are desperate for a quarterback. There are a lot of teams that are in need of a QB, so we could very well see a mad dash to try to get up there into the top 5, into the top 10 to get a quarterback. I don't see any more than 4, but realistically there are just 2 quarterbacks that should be taken to the top 10. But that's part of the fun of NFL draft analysis. Breaking these players down is, we can speculate all we want. We can do a lot of tape study and analysis, but really at the end of the day, it's going to depend on what teams are there, what teams are valuing their quarterbacks. We're not going to have their draft boards. We'll have our own draft boards, and that's part of the fun of it, is being able to put those draft boards together. We still have the 2023 season to wrap up before we get into any of the pre-draft process, and I will be here every step of the way for you as well. So I hope you've enjoyed the content to this point. And until next time, everyone, for ReadyForTheDraft.com, this has been the Ready for the Draft podcast. I've been your host, Gregg Schutze. Take care, everyone. Enjoy your week. And until next time, I am out of here.